Yeah, so part of our in-service training days, as they often get called, is a little bit of training about what we do as police officers, and it can have a variety of different topics throughout. And the most recent one that I was asked to help put together is centred around hate crime and awareness around people that might be victims of hate or might have people in their own family that could be subjected to hate crimes. And the theme of the day began with an input from Leicester University, because that's where the Centre of Hate Studies is based, and they're currently running a partnership course with the Police and Crime Commissioners team, hence we were asked to work with them ourselves. So they did the input in the morning, and in the afternoon we wanted to make it more awareness raising and more staff focused rather than just training. And one of the things that when we speak to our colleagues about what they would like to see from these training inputs is real life survivors. We try not to use the word victims, because we think if you come through an ordeal and you can come and talk to us, you are a survivor of something. So we like to get people who've experienced things firsthand. It was very hurried put together, but on New Year's Eve, that's how last minute it was, I asked Narvel if he could help me out, because I've got a spot and you've got 4 days to prepare, and I need you every 2 weeks on a Thursday between 12 and 2. So there are not many people can fill that gap. So I was very fortunate that Narvel, you know, I've listened to him and Terry, and I know some of the concerns that they've raised. Not only in their life and how they come to know each other, but we'll go on to that. So first met Narvel in October 2017, as I did John. We had a question and answer run by Derbyshire LGBT at the Quad. And from there we were talking about various issues, and I got to meet Narvel. I didn't know at the time he was a celebrity like he is. Starring in many a thing. I should forward the emails on Gaz. But yeah, Narvel invited me along, and I think he was I don't think he quite remembered in the November of 2017 when I turned up exactly who I was. So I just walked through the door.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I didn't know you walked through that door, and when I saw police, then I thought, oh my goodness, it's that bloke that was on the John Yates sat there, I sat here, and John's partner sat there, and Fred was somewhere up there on with the notables, yes, with Grace and others, and Ian and various other.
I was filling in because the person who wanted to be there couldn't make it.
Is that right?
So that was right. Who would have thought by chance this would evolve?
Yeah.
So that's how I first got to meet Narvel, and obviously listening to some of the input that he's given over time, and getting to know Narvel and Terry as friends outside of work, as well as just being at Belper, Golden Rainbows, and some of the things that they've gone on to do. I thought, you know, what a great person it would be to have in front of my colleagues to explain to them what it's like being a gay man growing up, what it was like for Narvel growing up, you know, in times before it was legal. And many people that we ask in there, you know, we've got millennials in the police force now that were born in the year 2000. They don't know any of the obstacles that you would have gone through in life, and that's why I think it was an invaluable lesson for those to see just what Narvel and Terry have gone through throughout their time.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be funny. I mean, obviously this is serious stuff, but the way it's evolved, that's why I called it the double act, you see. It actually worked very well, because at a certain point, I want to talk to you, not to these cards. So at a certain point, I just had to say to Fred, "What's next, Fred?" And they thought it was hilarious.
It was.
Didn't they?
And can I say, you see, I'm a bit more modern than Narvel. I use it off my data device. So these are my electronic cards, because we both forget what we're talking about. We look at each other.
Yeah.
Tell us about your dad, Narvel.
Yeah. and this is it. This is my technology. Yes, what I can see and hold. Anyway, okay.
So we begin now then with your journey in life.
Yeah, well, okay. So they wanted, what Fred particularly wanted is to reference when I met Terry. I met him in 1976. And I wanted to tell you that in 1976, Belper was a quiet conservative backwater. Now the nearest gay scene, for me, being a non-drinker, this is where I've always struggled to fit in with the gay world, non-drinker. He was the Derby Turkish baths, and there was the public Turkish baths, so you had to be careful there, you know, to watch what you were doing, and things did happen. Anyway, I won't go on about that too much. But in this small mill town, the only gay venue was in fact not very far from here, an elderly man an old-fashioned elderly man who hosted an open house for secretive, repressed visitors. They were warmly welcomed into his picturesque cottage any time, day and evening. Anonymous men. Well, he was very good, a bit like here. Tea and cakes, you know, treated, and it's very nice. Now, the one thing I have to tell you about this elderly man is, sadly, it wasn't his fault, and I feel a bit guilty saying it, but he was of a repellent aspect. He was known as the Belper crone, and he had a penetrating leer if he liked something.
Shall you have a cup of tea now? Or shall you wait and have something later?
And occasionally you might get invited up for a massage. But anyway, he, you know, that leer, it reminded me of, you've seen Snow White, the old queen is Snow White, when she comes to the, you know, and she says, it's apple pie. You know, and all that, it's getting Snow White to its poisoned apple. So it was a bit like that with these eyes. And I always remember also on the mantelpiece, it was a primitive Victorian place. It hadn't been changed for years. He was already very, very old then. Do you know, I think he was actually younger than I am now, but he seemed old. He really did in those days when he was younger. And anyway, there's this plate on the wall, and it says on the plate, it says, and I can hear him saying it as I read it,
Make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver, the other gold.
and and his head used to go, like that, you see, all the time. Anyway, so, okay, 1976, homesickness drove me back in 1976, and I met Terry. And I met Terry at the Crone's cottage. And when I say cottage, I mean it's where he lived, you know. He also visited other cottages. Yeah. Terry had gone there because, not because he knew anything about it, he went there because the man wanted an electrical job doing, so he went to fix something. And the way he was very crafty, he used to leave things about to try and tempt these workmen to indulge. So Terry was in the bedroom and he saw these magazines. Now when I say porn, it was very soft porn. These young men were actually partially clothed, which I think actually is more interesting, but that's a personal taste. And anyway, he saw this and he realised straight away that the man was gay. But then he saw a picture of me. One of my best pictures was actually hanging up to see, the Belper Crone's name was Victor, his real name. And Victor had got a picture of me, and Terry said, oh, I'd like to meet him. So that was rather nice, and so I invited him over, and that's how Terry and I met. And anyway, well, so the shock of coming out caused Terry, sadly, to go into a mental home for about 6 weeks, 5 or 6 weeks. And
you need to explain, at the time you met Terry, Terry was married. So
oh yes, that's right, yes, thank you.
That's
thank you.
right.
Yeah, he'd got children. He got 2 fostered girls and 2 adopted boys. And so obviously it was a real crisis, and I was the cause of the crisis. I'll come back to that later on. Oh dear. And he was offered electric shock treatment, and what it is try to cure him of his homosexuality. And I'm going to use that word. I know it's not fashionable, but people my age, we often, don't we? You know, we use homosexual quite a bit. And anyway, it didn't happen. He didn't do it, thank goodness. But he was in serious, and eventually he had to leave the home. And I've got this memory of him coming to, because I lived in this cottage on Derby Road with my mother at the time, because we came back from America together. And looking out the window, and I saw him holding his boys. The girls was taken away straight away. the boys, fortunately his wife was pretty good, she fought for him. And so he still had the boys, but he was holding the hands of, one was 6 and one 9. And it was, you know, traffic roaring both ways and having difficulty crossing the A6. It was something to see him hold their little hands until a suitable gap appeared. Oh, something about it really, really struck my conscience. An overwhelming tempest of circumstances have been tearing that family unit asunder, and I was that tempest. I was destroying that family. But I couldn't abandon Terry. Right, going back now to my background, I'm going to take you back to Hina, yes. Hina, yeah. Hina in 1957 was a pretty primitive place, and I went to Hina Church of England school, junior school, and I've got to explain to you that I was in the playground. You had to fight, you had to protect yourself, you had to be one of the lads, all boys, and there was 48 people in that class. Unfortunately for me, the schoolmaster, for some reason he hated me, probably it's because I was effeminate, and he encouraged the other boys to torment me. They wouldn't even let me go to the toilet, so several times I went home with messed trousers, soiled trousers, and my mother, well, she was ashamed of me as well, so was my father. My father never forgave me for not playing football, but my mother, she used to shake her head and she'd say, "You make work for me." And that was it. And I was on it just the other day. I was telling a woman about this, and I said she had a 12-year-old boy, and I said, "What would you do?" She said, "I could be at that school so fast, feet wouldn't touch." She said, "I want to know what's going on." But that, you see, teachers in those days were very highly respected and feared to a certain extent. The other thing is, before Fred reminds me, I sometimes forget this, as I wasn't much good for anything, and I certainly was bottom of the class, because when you were being tortured, I mean, they used to dead leg me, they used to win me, either of those would bring you down, or they scream in my ear, so I'm a bit deaf now. They do all that, but they wouldn't, they've got to the toilet a bit, but they, yeah, I was going to say something then. But anyway, oh yes, yes, I know. They used to coerce me to pleasure them, the big lads, the big boys, and I had to put my hands in the pockets of, there's about 3 or 4 that I did it regularly to. Not out of, I was forced to do it. They didn't touch me, I mean, they didn't touch me, but they found my hands very useful, and so that was, I'm not going to say that that was the worst thing of it. The worst thing was the humiliation. Now, okay, now then, guess who came to the rescue? I was rescued by a man who lived round the corner. They used to refer to him as Grandad. He was an old coal miner, and you could see it had a rough life. He got a cauliflower nose and ears. His whole, and his skin was ingrained with coal dust, and he was obviously retired. And he lived in a house around the corner which was covered in ivy. I think he was squatting there. I don't think, I think it was a squat, because you'd have to sort of go through the ivy to find there was a house there. And somewhere on Ray Street is my best memory. Yeah. Anyway, so I remember I was taken there by this one lad. In the book I call him Sandy. I said, "Oh, this is in Sea Change, my last title." I was taken there, and this old man, you know, sitting in his great chair, he hardly ever got up. Bring him over here, meaning, you know, I'll bring him over here. And so this Sandy pushed me up to Grandad, and yeah, he fondled me. Okay, now that wasn't particularly pleasant at first. I started to get used to it, started to like it actually. But the point here I want to tell you about Grandad is that a paedophile, it comes in all sorts of ways. So there are bad ones and there are not so bad. I'm not suggesting he's any good one. I won't recommend him as a babysitter. I certainly won't do that. But and he was crafty. He was very crafty in many ways. But penetration he did not approve of. So that was that's probably influenced. It's probably why I didn't get AIDS, because you get imprinted, don't you? Well, I think you do sexually with it. And I think that Fred takes the view. Fred will speak for himself, but I think Fred takes the view that I was pretty seriously damaged by that.
I think it is, yes. And when you look back, and I was speaking when I speak to my colleagues, you know, Narvel talks almost affectionately about Grandad, and you go on to mention where you reached a dark place in your life.
Yeah.
And yet he's been took to the level of paedophile, to be abused by a group of older kids who also force him into sexual abuse. Yeah. And I said, can you imagine if your own children came back and told you this story? It seems unbelievable in the work that we do that happened. That was Narvel's world growing up, and I think it's hard to comprehend.
Yeah.
You know.
And you may be right. I don't know. I'm not the best person to know, but I did go to a counsellor, and this was at the time when the Channel 4 camera crew were following me and Terry around for that 6 months. It was 2014 up to the Christmas. And I had a breakdown, or something awful happened. And just to cut a long story short, I was counselled, and the man who counselled me said that you're suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And I said, hang on, I said, that's soldiers, isn't it, that have seen terrible things. He said, you were 12, all this happened to you, this is what made you the way you are. I'm promiscuous, Terry isn't. I'm promiscuous, I go to the sauna every week and I enjoy it, and it's the safest place for a gay man to go to, so I always say that, you know, if you're inclined to go to such a place, then that's safer than going into the woods, for example. Yeah. We were talking about that earlier. So he said, yeah, they have flashbacks. I do have rages. Terry will know more about this, you know, than you do, but I do have rages, I have flashbacks, I do have problems. Sometimes I'm very moody, and, well, anyway, so that's...
I think at a young age, I think that, you know, when you refer to what soldiers have experienced in war,
yeah.
You know, the effects that that's had on Narvel, you can see how, at the time, that might have been deemed as his saviour, but how mentally confusing that would have been, not knowing that this guy that is there as his saviour is also abusing him sexually, and not understanding what that abuse was. Because that obviously then took you to where, when you were living at Hina, and considering taking your own life.
Yeah, oh yes, yes, of course, yeah, suicide, yeah. I was, that's what I told, because Grandad was my confidant, anyway, whatever. I confided in him, and I said I was desperately trying to commit suicide, and he was horrified at this. He did it. At first he said what they all said, "Hit him back, give him bitter fish." And then he realised that I just couldn't. I couldn't, and therefore I suffered in this way. I thought about jumping out of the window, the bedroom window, but even at the age of 12, realised that wasn't high enough. And you know, we didn't have any guns then, but a gun in the mouth is supposed to be a definite, easy way to commit suicide, and that, well, I wouldn't be standing here today if my dad had a gun. So, what happened?
Shortly after that, your family started to move out to America.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, later on. Yeah. So I didn't. So obviously I didn't. Oh yeah, Grandad. Let me quote him. He said to me about killing him. "Oh, I'm gonna do that, lad. dead lad can do no, a live lad can do something. I often think about that, you know, when I'm here now, I'm doing something, and that's something. Yes, moving on. We went to America eventually, and well, I suppose that as I went older, the hostility between me, my parents and my sisters was not quite so great, but they never warmed to me. I mean, I did run away during that time for about, I was 3 weeks, and that's part in the book, Sea Change, and when I came back, the police had never been informed. No, you know, they just, he's back, you know. It was a bit like that. Anyway, so I knew that I was loathed, and but the loathing was a little bit less. But let me just tell you, right, shall we go to the funeral? My dad died. My dad died in 1972, I think it was.
And this is whilst you're in Detroit?
Yeah, I was in. Yeah, we went to America, 63 to 76. I came back. It was good. I met Terry on the first time, because it would have been a bit awful if I'd have met him earlier, because I'd have to go back and get things sorted out. Anyway, my dad died, and I've got 2 sisters. One is, well, they're both horrible to me, but anyway, never mind that. My dad was laying in an open coffin. This is the story, and you have to go the 3 days of being in state. You have to wander around and talk to your relatives and things like that. And well, I didn't have much to say to them. They didn't have much to say to me. But I just wandered over to look at my dad, and a man strolled over to me, and he said, "Makes you think, doesn't it?" And I said, "It sure does." And he said, "Friend of the family?" I said, "No." I said, "That's my dad." But he was really shocked. He had to, you know, he couldn't make sense of this. But he said, "Cynthia never told me she had a brother." That hurt me tremendously. Right, shall we go to Hudson's now?
And as it's your video, you can explain it however you wish.
Hudson's department store is one of the places in Detroit where you could meet other gay people, especially on the 14th floor, and there was a very active toilet up there. I was warned, don't go there, it's dangerous. I was told, you know, this is the most incredibly stupid thing I did. But I went anyway, because I thought, quickie would be nice, you know. So anyway, I went in there, and anyway, you don't want me to go into too much detail now, but well, I was going to say there were 2 doors. So if it was always possible, if anybody came through, member of the public, or worse, the police or yobs or whatever, it was possible just to, if you're quick, you know, it's possible just to stop what you're doing and pull up and be standing innocently at the urinal. And usually the person that came in was in the, he'd probably say carry on. But on this occasion, I thought I was all right. I was in this bloke. He wasn't particularly, talk about pretty police. So you have the younger, he was young, but I didn't particularly find him all that attractive, to be honest. I just wanted, you know, to get off. And he said, "What do you want to do?" I should have been warned by that, because people tend not to say that, you know. What do you know? I'm daft, aren't I? Because I thought, well, the 2 doors, and you know, I'm safe from the police. You don't think the police are going to be in there. You don't think the police are going to be talking. I was brought up with Dixon of Dock Green, you know, and that was, I'm sure. Well, you never know. I don't know. So I told him what I wanted, and he always, it was frightening. He just slightly bent down, and he kept doing it, and it was a badge. And oh no, oh God, oh, this was terrible. So I was, you know, mouth dry, everything, and he said, "Now listen," he said, "what we're going to do, we're going to go out here," he said, and I've got somebody out there. I said, "Well, I'm going to take you to the police station in Detroit." 3 murders a day, Detroit. This was Now, of course, it was easy for them because people like me, you know, go steady, just give in. And, so I stood out there with the officer, and the officer is looking for his partner, you see. Your partner? Is that the fellow officer? And he said, let's call him Joe. I don't know what his name was. Joe? And then he couldn't find him because all these people milling around. It's a busy store, you know. Into my head, as I say, I always say to the police officers, I say, you know, remember that, you know, don't give them any ideas. So anyway, I stood there. Oh, I wasn't going to got a gun somewhere because they usually are, don't they? Police, American police. So I stood there like a zombie, and he eventually came back. Now, how long was it? If it was 1 minute, it seemed like a long time, because you're standing there waiting. Anyway, he came back with the other one, you know, probably muttering to him, you know, leaving me, you know. Anyway, so took me down to the car, and opposite the Hudson's is my bank, and they had already told me that I would need £100 to be bailed out. You've got to have $100 to bail out. Well, you don't walk around with $100, and it's a lot of money. So I didn't. But I did have a cheque, and I said, look, if I could go into my bank and get, you know, I mean, one of them could have come in with me. You know. Anyway, they looked at each other and that, and I just wondered what was going through their mind then. You know. Anyway, no, it's against the rules. So they played straight in that sense. And took me to the police station, where I stayed for 5 hours. Now, I actually only had one number, the last person I wanted, and that was my other very hostile, homophobic sister, Hillary. And I rang and told her, and she sort of, I remember she, wait a minute, I mean, it's almost as though she was expecting something like that. And anyway, they did come. But if I just get to the bit where I was released from this jail, which put me in on my own, that was something. It was a terrible place, and that's the only time I've been in prison. So once too often. Yeah, well, if you did check, you're not supposed to find out, because what happened is. When I got home, I was really in a terrible state. So I rang friends, and they said, you go to the Woodward Bar, which was the main gay bar in Detroit, and you ask for the name of a shyster lawyer who is supposed to know the police and know the judge and know, you know, everything else, and the right lawyer. So. Anyway, I did, and he told me, he said, it's going to cost you $300, which was cheap, I found. That was cheap. $100, they all said, I don't know, $100 for the police, $100 for the judge, and $100 for the shyster lawyer. That was the thing. My lover in America, I did meet someone, fell in love with him, another book title, Secret Someone. He actually paid $900, so it was exactly 3 times more, and he was picked up in Palmer Park, which was a cruisy park, which I wouldn't dare go into a park in darkness, but he used to go there, and he's probably, if you end up with being arrested, it probably isn't as bad as it could be. So 3 murders a day, Detroit. So anyway. That was that.
So you eventually come back to the UK, 1976.
Yeah.
Now, bear in mind, there's been some significant changes in the law by then. 1967, an Act of Parliament, the United Kingdom, which partially decriminalised homosexuality, but you still have to be 2 consenting males over the age of 21. So bearing in mind, 1976, many years have passed. Meets Terry. Terry's married, and at the time, Terry was on the board of Adopted Children and Safeguarding. And even though he was on that board, when they found out that he'd come out as being gay, they removed the 2 foster girls straight away and tried to take the adopted 2 boys off you, didn't they? It's only because your wife played a big part in that prevented that from happening. So we're trying to say to everybody, the laws change, you know, we're more accepting, and even up to, you know, modern day. The age of 18 consent was lowered in 1994. and eventually to 16 under the Sexual Offences Amendment Act of 2000 to make sex between consenting gay men the same as heterosexual couples. Now, again, we think we've come on so far in the world, and when Narvel first arrived back and Terry was subjected to electric aversion therapy, the majority of the police colleagues that I've worked with have never heard of this. And I said, can you imagine somebody says you don't like the colour blue and we're going to electrocute you every time you think of the colour blue? You know, that's ultimately what you're asking. You're asking somebody to stop what is a natural thought from happening. And I can't even imagine what that must have been like. So when you did eventually come back and you settled down and your relationship blossomed, you got a job as a teacher.
Yeah, yeah.
At Valley Comprehensive School in Worksop, North Nottinghamshire.
Yeah, yes, that's right, yeah. Yeah, I hadn't been there very long. It wasn't a knock from the doors. Anyway,
Yep.
yeah, okay. Yeah, I was in the staff room and sitting around. There's probably about as many people as there are, about 10, 11, 12 people. And I was busy marking and doing stuff. There was another guy in the room and he finished his stuff. I found out later on that he knew all the shortcuts, but there we go. He leaned back in his chair. Oh, he said, well, that's that done then. He said, nothing much to do now. He said, I suppose we could go out and beat up a queer. And of course I didn't say anything, because I would have to, they'd say, why are you so upset about that? So I said nothing, but I was very concerned. And to my horror, he repeated it, I think, twice, so 3 times in all. And then a friendly colleague came up to me and said, no, I said, can I have a quiet word with you? I said, yeah. He said, if I were you, he said, why don't you socialise a bit with us? Come to the pub with us. Don't drink, you see. Come to the pub and all that. He said, get yourself a girlfriend. Talk about her. Talk about her. And he said, the boss, as they called him, the headmaster, if he thought you were queer, you'd be out here so fast your feet wouldn't touch. So that was said to me. But I was nearly 18 years, 17 plus something years teaching. And it wasn't until the very last few years, and it was when it was towards the 1990s had come, and there was a lot of talk about gay rights and things like that. And in some ways that made it worse for me, so I can understand why some people say that. I'm this letter writer, I've written the books and everything, and there's a certain amount of hostility I get because of that. People don't want, to be challenged and all that. They want to stay very, very private and all the rest of it. So, I did have a few problems with a few sixth form lads. The girls were marvellous. No problem with the girls in the sixth form, but the lads, yeah, they gave me a rough time. And eventually I was sinking so low. It was April 1995, wasn't it? I was sinking so low. Terry knew I was pretty, I used to come on Friday night and spend the weekend with him and collapse. And then struggle back Monday morning. And I'll just give you 2 examples that really upset me. I was walking down the corridor with my register one morning, and there was a bunch of sixth formers, and one of them said, "Yo took a chance there, didn't you, Bob? Turning your back on him." And that was a reference to me. In other words, it wasn't safe for any young man to turn their back on me. There was another time when I opened the room. There was a bunch of sixth form lads that wanted to go into a classroom. They said, "Can you let us into this room, because they're milling around." Well, better to have them in there and out of the way than in the corridor. So I opened it. And another lad said, one of his mates said, "Bumstead wall." And really, really was tough, that. And I remember being in my classroom, and I was at the end of the classroom. I got my television. It was my television because I invested a fair bit of money into my work. I've never grudged paying for things. It happens now a lot because of the cuts and everything. But and then underneath that was my video. It was a Betamax, and I thought, well, I can't lift the television without asking someone, and then I thought they'll want to know why you're taking your television, so I thought that. But I could lift the Betamax because I knew I was going to walk out of that room and never come back. I didn't care about the fact that I might not get my pension. I didn't care about that, I really didn't. I just knew that for my own sanity I had to leave. And so I went to the doctors and he signed me off for a couple of weeks, and then another couple of weeks, and then it was a month, and so on. And eventually I escaped from teaching on a small pension. And that's been very handy.
And eventually started to write books.
Oh yes, yes, yeah, thank you. Yeah, books, yes, yeah. Well, in the big police office, I did have a couple of books. I say these are props, you know. I'm not here to sell books; these are props anyway. Yeah, so I did write books, but I didn't write a gay book, and I came out in 2003. 2003, I wrote Lost Lad, and that was an openly gay book. You can't read that and not know I'm gay. So I had to be open with everybody after writing that book. And then I wrote Scruffy Chicken, which in some ways is my favourite book, and that was in '06. And then in the next one was Secret Summer, which was 2010. And that was published in the United States, so I can say I'm a published author, although that publisher was not up to what I thought, you know, it wasn't all that brilliant. But anyway, and then I wrote Sea Change, which I can strongly recommend, and of course I'm writing Double Life, and it hopefully will be printed, published this year.
And from being a teacher at In Worksop, you were last summer invited back
to
attend the Worksop Pride.
That's right. I was. That's right. We got this invitation from Claire and Helen. Helen, well, you probably know them, John. And they said that a number of their young people had requested me. I think they were just being kind, actually. But anyway, so Fred wanted to come. And that was really nice, and so we marched, and I've never done that, and I will march in Belper Pride, absolutely. I'll be with you shoulder to shoulder there. But it was the first time I'd ever done that. It was marvellous, wasn't it?
It was a very good day.
It was a fantastic day, yeah, and it was really nice. And Worksop is where my pupils live, so I was really afraid. I thought, you know, they're grown-up men, but I thought I could hear them shouting something abusive or nasty. Although I got the police with me. But anyway, wasn't necessary, wasn't needed. Everybody was marvellous. It was smiling faces, and it was a wonderful experience.
The turnout was quite tremendous. I mean, I don't live that far from Worksop, so to me that would be my local Pride March. And I was surprised, you know, pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
I think, did it say well over 1,000 people?
I'll bet, yeah.
It was tremendous.
It was a mile,
Yeah,
the march was a mile, yeah. Yeah. Have you got them? Oh, we're recording, aren't we? I'll ask you that later, yeah. Think about Belper March now.
So we think all of this, we think we've done really well. We've spoke about the law, how it's changed and how we've moved forward.
Yeah.
And even though the law's changed, society will take a lot longer. So the change that we need to have in society is by far exceeding the law. The law can be enacted in Parliament, that can be passed almost overnight. There might be some campaigning, but it can quickly be done. But yet the work that we've got to do in the communities is far greater indeed. And we speak about some of the concerns, even though Narvel and Terry have got this wonderful relationship, they've been together for over 40 years. Last summer, going on from the Pride March, you're in Matlock when there was the incident.
Oh yeah, yeah, that was a big surprise. Yeah, I'd better just mention that. We were walking along. We've been to Matlock Bath, been to one of our cafes we've discovered, quite a nice place. Crossed the river over the Jubilee Bridge, and I don't know if you know, that's where the pirate ship is. This sand, Gary knows about it, and it's very nice. And we were together, obviously, so anybody looking at us would know that we were together. I don't think they necessarily know anything else, but I walked a bit ahead of Terry, and I saw him talking. Terry is very sociable. He talks to people. I'm not very good with small talk, but anyway, and I saw him talking to someone. I wait, as he just talked to people. So then he came up to me smiling. He said, "I've just been accused of being a paedophile," and he was grinning. But that's how you deal with nasty things. You know, you can. And then later on, it started to hit home. You know, this is a terrible thing had happened. I'll just tell you what the man said. Did he call it pervert? Is that the word?
Perv, didn't he?
Effing perv.
Effing perv, yeah. So and we've never been back since.
He said, I'll get the police. I said, well, I'll wait for them.
Yeah, that's
That,
right.
that knocked him
Good.
off his pillar, and all he did then was carried on calling me an effing perv.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just waved my hand and came away.
And that's why it's important to keep having like your pride marches, getting out there in the communities and showing people that we can all stand side by side. Events like this, you know, not only have we as police got to do some work as an organisation to prove to you and Narvel that we want you to be a part of our community, we want to support you, come and tell us information, you know, have the security. And I know from that I reported that to my colleagues in Matlock to explain what issues they were having. But society, as we're talking about, it's taken a long time to change. And Narvel references very early on Hina. Now in the paper recently, Gaz will be able to back me up on this, we've had the issues that I can talk about because they've been in the paper, some far right stickers where people are expressing their views of the world, which is completely unacceptable. And this has come from the same place as what Narvel talks about, with their bigoted views 60 years ago. So 60 years on, they're still going to be alive, most men, aren't they?
Yeah.
On that age, you've gone to school, you're still
Oh,
here.
yeah,
So
yeah.
potentially, you know, you've got 3-4 generations further down,
Yeah.
and they've still got this same view of the world. And we know there's a lot more work got to be done in these areas, and outreach work from the police as well as organisations like Derbyshire LGBT, where we've got to give people the confidence to come forward and report these matters to them. You know, it's not an easy process, and I know it's quite easy to say, let's pick up the phone and we'll solve all your problems. It's not that easy. It's ongoing work that's got to continually be done in all aspects of hate crime monitoring. So that's where we need to keep it moving forward.
But also in the Pride March at Worksop, you were walking side by side with pupils.
Yes,
Yes,
that's
one of
right,
your
yeah.
pupils.
A former pupil, who's contacted me before, I can say his name's Tim, he's fairly open. And I didn't know he was gay at the time, but he was, and is. And then there was another one too, from, I was telling Ian about it, wasn't I? And he was from special needs. And he said to me walking along, he said, "I'm not very clever." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I'm a special needs." I said, "You're here now." I said, "Nonsense." I used to like, occasionally I was given what they call a sub, and you go into a different class. And if it was special needs, I really enjoyed it because I could really make progress with them. And that's why when I came from Monday Street, I went straight into, there was an A stream, a B stream, and Mrs. Cook's class, and everybody knew what Mrs. Cook's class was, and I was in there, and I came top of that class. Well, of course I would, because they were special needs, and I was in a very poor state, having been tortured, because that's what it was. So I got this lad. I had a very interesting chat with him. He would be a 30-something, I suppose, and so obviously I wouldn't have never have seen him. But yeah.
And then we just gone to asking if there's any questions.
Oh yeah.
You know, and to thank Narvel. Narvel has a very eloquent and articulate way of expressing his story. And although at times he has got a whimsical view of the world in how he recalls it, it's still a very serious matter that we does discuss. And I am immensely proud of him showing what bravery he has in order to stand in front of, in total, nearly 600 of my colleagues to express that view. And it's one of the only training inputs that we have where we've had continued positive reports. You know, everybody's come forward and thanked Narvel. They didn't thank you in person, haven't they?
Oh yeah,
you know,
yeah, very,
thank you
very
for telling
warm,
us that story.
very
Because
warm
we learn
reception.
more by seeing people who have a story to tell, because that is something that resonates with you when you're dealing with something. You know, the next time you'll deal with that kind of hate-motivated aspect, or think back to the words that Narvel used. You know, when you're taking a protracted inquiry about historical sexual abuse, you'll listen to Narvel's story and that will play again in your head. So it's been hugely beneficial for the input that we had. So we're very grateful. Any questions of Narvel or myself?
Questions or comments? Could be comments.
He did. Can I just add? We did have a little certificate, a good work notation to give to Narvel at the end.
Yeah.
And I asked my inspector, who wasn't in uniform at the time. Those who don't know, Keith Chambers. I don't know if you're any Hollyoaks fans who know who Ricky Whittle is. Keith's he's about 6 foot, shaved head. He's a very attractive black man.
Yeah.
And as he awarded the certificate to Narvel returned and went, "Oh, hello."
And
And there was about 100 of my colleagues there who just actually burst into laughter.
It was just spontaneous, because I didn't know. I'd been fancying him. I'd been looking at him, and I didn't know he was a senior officer, or I was just one of the lads as far as I
And we
could
still
see.
talk about that today. Whenever I see him, I see Narvel. Oh yes, he always references to you. Tell him hello.
Yeah, I said hello. Actually, somebody was very famous comedian. Was it Leslie Phillips? Leslie Phillips. Yes, that's right. Was quite nodding here. Yeah, Leslie Phillips said hello. Yes, and it came out very. It was spontaneous. They say that makes the best. That's why. See, I've not picked up these for a long time, but I've got Fred. So it's better to talk to people and address you directly, rather than address the cards.
Okay. Are we all right then, Terry? Did you press record?